There we go. Yeah. Whoa, yes. How's that? Nice work, boy. Yes, yes, double up. Yes, oh, great. Yeah, they are. Try and get mine. No stress, no carry on. So we left Pretoria at about 10 o'clock on the Saturday morning, and the idea was to drive the scenic route past Sterkfontein Dam, because nor Chris or Andre has been there before, and I really felt the need to kind of show them the awe of that venue. So we drove past there on the scenic route, and fortunately, once we pulled over to take some photos, Chris noticed that the bearing wasn't too lacquer.
That's right, yeah, and I think it's important, Ivan. I've seen a few guys have some long hassles and some big financial hassles. Always keep a spare bearing with you, because luckily we did have one, and Ivan and I managed to change it out. It cost us an hour 15, but we managed to get back on the road and on our way.
Slept over at my buddy's Nathan's place, and then made our way through Port Shepstone, Port Edward, the old road, Bizana, Lusiki Flagstaff, all the way through a valley of 1,000 turns, which Andre didn't enjoy too much on the back seat. And yeah, so we were just south of Port St. John's, about half an hour or so, and got there with just enough light left to be able to get the boats and stuff in and make it to the chalet before it gets dark.
I think reaching that launch, my first time at that estuary, it was so beautiful. The sun was going down, Devon. I don't know if you remember, the mangroves were up on the tide, so the water was actually in the mangroves. There's a lot of activity happening at the top end of the river, so we jumped on the boat and headed on down. And I think an important note is that it's good to get in on high tide, because it's going to be forgiving on the way you maneuver the channels. So it was very forgiving for me as a first timer going through those channels. If the tide gets a bit lower, you're going to need to be a bit more careful, but man, the water was amazing. As we moved from the mangroves to the main estuary, it turns from sort of tingy to crystal clear like your pool. It was just absolutely amazing. So to drink that in, I enjoyed having that time when we launched. And then obviously heading, down from the mangroves to the main estuary, it's a beautiful boat ride. It's long enough and wide enough to get your boat up on the plain, and to actually get going into that estuary, and you can see the mouth of the ocean in the distance, and it's tempting. But I had a little bass boat. It was very tempting to just head straight for that mouth, but it just lets you know what kind of a wild and beautiful marine environment you've actually managed to get yourself into, which I must say I haven't really found a scenario like that before. I think there was what we came to realize even from the first day. I think we were, I won't say lucky, but we had a bit of fisherman's luck on the first day, in that we went down there and we literally got on the water at exactly the right time. And I don't know if that was just a coincidence of planning, but it was actually when the tide was pushing pretty hard. And I just pushed the boat out and we let the tide take us up. Yeah. I was actually using the trolling motor to just guide the boat, but we let the tide take us all the way up. And so we were riding on that tide. And you need that little quick guy to make sound. Not so much. A little bit.
Yeah, there's a nice one.
Oh yes. Good job, Devon.
So
fish knocked my bait. We stopped and worked a bit.
Devon,
hit a couple more times. Now he got it. Woo.
He sees us there.
Oh, no ways! He was looking at us. Sorry, man, because you tried to force it. Should have maybe just given a bit more time.
That was nice. Yeah, kom hier rare. Oh, you actually broke the hook. Wow. Had this bait for a while, so it was bound to happen. Another one.
Decent little one. Not just like yours, but it's okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Need the net, or can you manage?
I think I can manage. Luckily, I'm fishing with the Serrano, so I've got a lot more power. Another little kingy. Yes. Good. Thanks, Stefan. Yes, man. This is a super fun way of fishing you. And they got gas for days. Super release. Alright, 2 to me and 0 to Diva. Oh, it's like that.
It's like
now. It's like that. The kingies are biting and guys won't help each other anymore.
Get your own stuff done.
They are biting. He just smoked that on the paws there. I was doing more my bass now. I didn't even have to strike that end. I'm messing up the net.
We're just gonna cut it down a bit. I mean, this is very bold. There we go.
Yes. Oh, yes. How's that? Nice work, boy. You called it.
Oh, strong.
Yes, yes, double up! Yes, come on!
Great. I think they're big eyes.
Yeah, they are.
Try and get mine next week. And
No stress, no, carry on. I got him under control. Ooh, he's
I
angry.
know they are.
Nice.
There you go.
Let's see if mine's the same.
Let's get yours.
Hold on, I think I can swing it.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to
It's a mess.
check trebles in your deck again. Yes! Alright, calm down, boy. Alright, I'm going to help you now. Okay, I'm probably going to throw mine as soon as I show it.
Yeah. How awesome is that?
Double up.
Cool.
Awesome.
And that's numbers.
The other one was still like 3
Yes,
times, 4 times.
bigger than that, yes.
That was a nice one.
That's the sad part about that one. That's why you couldn't force them with that one. They're good fighters, eh? Alright, that was good work, Evan. Sure, then they're not weak, eh? They give account to themselves. This is not a light rod. This is a Serrano. A strong bass rod. Ah, got you, buddy. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Alright, buddy. I am grateful. You are still fresh. Getting bigger. Woo!
is a lot of fun.
Be on your bicycle.
Yeah, that is a lot of fun.
So what you want to do is you want to, as soon as the clean water starts pushing in, you want to start fishing, because what happens is all the predatory fish, they basically follow that color line, and if you are in front of it or behind it, the fishing's never as good as it can be if you're right on top of it. And I mean, that was clearly evident throughout all the days that we were fishing. If you're not on that color line, then you're practically just sitting and doing nothing.
Well, it's more than the color line, isn't it? Because that was the indicator for us visually.
Yeah, yes.
But what was actually happening when I noticed in the estuary was that as obviously the tide would go out, it would leave dry sandbanks. And as the tide would come in, it would flood those sandbanks.
Yeah.
And you look at these little schools of mullet getting trapped as they would move in the moving water. As they constantly looked for eddies, they'd get trapped. And this is obviously where the kingfish, which was the first fish we really got onto, were getting into them.
Yeah.
Devon picked up a bucktail, which is not something I'm familiar with catching fish with, and he immediately caught up with me in catching fish till the point where we doubled up. And what I looked across and I noticed you were doing is you were focusing on keeping that bucktail in a certain strike zone.
So what was happening is, if the bait was too close to the surface, they wouldn't really look at it. And if it was too close to the bottom, they also wouldn't really look at it. So there was a very specific depth band that you had to operate in to get the optimal amount of bites. And obviously that's more or less the depth zone that the mullet and stuff like to operate in. So as long as you stayed in that little corridor, you were bound to get bit sooner or later. So the river in that section that Chris is referring to, our really productive section, the river makes an S-bend, and on both inside corners of that S-bend, it had really exposed sandbanks. I mean, like really, really shallow, a foot or so deep, where the channel next to it was about 5 or 6 foot deep. And the water on the spring tide, which was when we were there, there's a heck of a lot of water pushing in, and it's got nowhere to go except to drop off the channel. So, I mean, that created the absolutely perfect feeding environment. A lot of water pushing off that bank into the main channel, along with the water flowing in the channel proper. And they actually made it made a real good current line, which was actually clearly visible. And as long as you were operating within a couple of meters of that current line, you were bound to get bit at some point.
That will. Oh yeah. Go there, Devon. Watch out, watch out. Sorry, Devon, watch my line.
It's across here.
Excuse the French. Excuse my French. And I mean, it's an exciting bite.
Yeah.
I didn't realize why the rig up for the tackle of the light braid and the light leader and then the weak drag.
Yeah.
But honestly, those kingfish come in so fast and smack that lure so hard that the initial shock on your line, if you have any kind of drag that's too tight, is it's gonna rip it or break it, or and obviously you need the light line for the long casts and the good finesse presentation, because obviously those kingies have great eyesight. I watched a couple swim right up to the lure, look at it and turn away. So you gotta keep that bait with its maximum potential, essentially.
Yes, it's tiny.
So Chris was throwing that little SD3 minnow. It's an absolutely fabulous bait. We'll get that on camera now. And I was throwing a little XR6. And they both seemed to get the same amount of bites, as long as you were in the area that was holding a lot of fish. So it didn't really matter which you were fishing, the area was more important. And I mean, a clear indication of it would be, I mean, I'd get one and Chris would get one, or vice versa. So that means that...
Or together.
Or double up in that case, So as long as you were in the right area, the bait didn't really matter. It just needed to be in that specific zone. And then obviously you have to be at the right place at the right time, because the windows that we were getting the fish in, they were very, very small.
Yeah.
It wasn't that you could at any time, at any place, just chuck a bait and get bit. They were very small windows of opportunity, and the type of structure that we were looking for was very, very specific. There needs to be lots of moving water, and then obviously a corresponding depth. And then if there was a bit of dirty water in the mix, I mean, that was great.
That is what you needed, was a little bit of dirty water. must say, as a bass fisherman, I've been having the time of my life with these kingies. It's all about timing the tide. As it comes in, it pushes in, and it's got this clean water mixing with the dirty water onto these weird little sand troughs. And you kind of work those channels in the sand troughs quick. The jerkbait, I've been using the Sensation SD